And we are recording.
Yay.
Shall
Yes,
we begin with prayer?
we shall.
Yes.
Gracious and loving God, we come to you again this week, as we do each week, to discern with our minds and our hearts the word that we receive from you that have nourished generations before us, and we hope will nourish generations after us. And here we are in the present, being blessed by your word. We are aware of all this blessing, and we thank you for it in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, excellent. Well, I'm always amazed at what happens when we get these passages. And I just love the way that this passage came to us, kind of in this circuitous way, from the mind of our wonderful friend Bob, and then through Tina, who looked back through her archives and found this passage, and then to us, and here we are. And when I first saw this, I was like, Proverbs, really? We want to go into Proverbs? And it's just I think it's wonderful that we get to hop, skip, and jump all over the Bible. So I think last week we were in Philippians, which was a Pauline letter, and here we are in Proverbs. And the amazing thing, right, is that it's all in the same book, but the likelihood is that there were probably possibly almost 1,000 years of time elapsed between the recording of Proverbs and the writing of Philippians. And now, I actually don't have that on strict, like I didn't read that anywhere. So I should probably be careful what I say. But the wisdom literature, of which Proverbs is a part, was some of the early work of the collection of the Hebrew Bible. So, and it's very much a collection. The Proverbs is a collection of collections, essentially. So it's almost like we have this in the wisdom literature in the Hebrew Bible. We have really, I think, something that looks quite akin to what we might call oral tradition, right? And almost rather loosely edited version of oral tradition. So it's almost like, we had a collection here, a collection there, almost like Aesop's fables, almost like kind of thing, where you gathered them together and put them all in a book, which is called Proverbs, and it then shows up in the Bible. So I have this. I have a very, very, as you guys know, this is kind of quite a week for me. I'm kind of running on all cylinders and got multiple things on my plate, but I was able to kind of very quickly throw together very kind of the bare bones of a presentation. And thank you so much, Vicki, for putting together at the last minute, putting together the translations. That was super helpful. I took a screenshot of that, and I also added another translation in there as well. So I'll share that with you. Okay, let's see.
I'll probably stop in another couple weeks to see how you're doing. All right.
Okay. All right. So let me see. You guys can all see that, right?
Yep. Nope.
It's taking a minute here to load. Sorry about that. My computer's taking its time today. Okay, so we'll look at the translations, and I think that really like a wonderful kind of center of gravity in this passage is kind of heart and mind, which is kind of example of the way in which the kind of the culture and the thought of antiquity is very different from ours, and yet also informs us. And then we'll go into our kind of our regular discussion about the theological and pastoral implications of the passage. So since we have a relatively short passage here, I was thinking that maybe we could read them out loud, because what we have is we have a reasonably short passage, but we also have, but they're all very different the way
They're motivating.
the way that they're articulated. The translations are all, I think, are all pretty different and have some really interesting different ways, kind of center of gravity has. So would one of you be willing to read the contemporary English version that's here on the left?
I'll be glad to if you want.
Wonderful, thank you, Judith.
Okay.
Well said.
This is the contemporary English version. My child, listen carefully to everything I say. Don't forget a single word, but think about it all. Knowing these teachings will mean true life and good health for you. Carefully guard your thoughts because they are the source of true life. Never tell lies or be deceitful in what you say. Keep looking straight ahead without turning aside. Know where you are headed and you will stay on solid ground. Don't make a mistake by turning to the right or to the left.
Great, excellent. Okay, so pretty bare bones and straightforward contemporary English version. Would anybody else like to take the second one, the Passion Translation? Becky, thank you.
Yes, the Passion Translation. Listen carefully, my dear child. Do everything that I teach you and pay attention to all that I have to say. Fill your thoughts with my words until they penetrate deep into your spirit. Then, as you unwrap my words, they will impart true life and radiant health into the very core of your being. So above all, guard the affections of your heart, for they affect all that you are. Pay attention to the welfare of your innermost being, for from there flows the wellspring of life. Avoid dishonest speech and pretentious words. Be free from using perverse words no matter what. Set your gaze on the path before you. With fixed purpose, looking straight ahead, ignore life's distractions. Watch where you're going. Stick to the path of truth, and the road will be safe and smooth before you. Don't allow yourself to be sidetracked for even a moment or take the detour that leads to darkness.
So different, right? So different, and yet really capturing much of the same essence. More long-winded, but I really feel like there's a lot of really rich stuff going on there too. It's really very interesting. One was very bare bones, and the other one was really full. I feel.
Seems to be more theological too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how about the third one here? Can any would like to read this? The new Revised Standard. Yes, Lori, thank you.
The New Revised Standard Version. My child, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them escape from your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech, and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Keep straight the path of your feet, and all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil.
Wonderful. Excellent. Okay, so so much going on here, and I really, the more I kind of encounter this passage, the more interesting it is. I'm trying to get all of you at the same time. I can't seem to get all of you at the same time. Oops. Oops. Hello. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, can you all see the three translations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So so one of the super interesting things about that my Old Testament teacher taught me when I was she was my great mentor when I was at Union Seminary way back in the early 90s. And one of the things that she taught me was that there was this Hebrew word, which was called which was nephesh, and she spelled it Nephesh, nephesh. And what this word meant was that it was a word that I don't think we have in English, which was kind of a word that a single word that meant all of the body, the heart, the mind, and the soul all together. And one of the interesting things for us is that we don't really have a word that encompasses all those things at the same time. In order for us to talk about the heart and the spirit and the mind, we kind of have to talk about use different words for each. I guess the word self might contain all those things, but it doesn't seem to have quite the same value, I think, as this Hebrew word that I was talking about. So here we have in translation, we have all these, this passage has reference to the mind, has reference to the heart, it has reference to, I think it has some of the different ones have reference to the spirit, and they're kind of interestingly interchangeable in these passages. So I'm hoping that perhaps we can focus on the ideas of the heart and the mind and the soul in these different translations of this verse. Like, for example, I think 23, verse 23, across all of them. Verse 23 in the contemporary English version says, "Carefully guard your thoughts, because they are the source of true life." 23 in the second one says, "Above all, guard the affections of your heart, for they affect all that you are." And 23 in the New Revised Standard says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life." It's interesting, isn't it?
What is that? I don't totally understand what they're saying, because each one seems so different in a way to me.
Uh-huh.
Talking about thoughts, affections, and your heart,
Mm-hmm.
that they affect all that you are. I'm not sure if I understand the meaning of that.
Yeah, what do folks think? Because so here we have, like, carefully guard your thoughts. Usually we think of our thoughts as being something that's kind of the product of our mind, right? But here it seems like the suggestion, I think here, seems to suggest that that this contemporary English version seems to suggest use the word, I think it seems to translate the word that others are translating as heart. It seems to be translating as thoughts. So that would seem to suggest that thought, that the heart is the source of thoughts rather than the mind, which is an interesting.
It's just movement.
Is that because of something to
But you were
do?
backward and forward. That's why I was like, you did it differently. You moved yourself differently.
Sorry, what was that?
Is that because of the different translations from the Greek, that they have these different ways of putting it?
Well, so I would assume, because this is from the Hebrew Bible, I would that the original was in Hebrew, so that
Do you, so you're also,
although it's entirely possible that the translation came from Hebrew to Greek and then to us,
resting is good.
the likelihood is that we have multiple layers of translation here, but I think probably the original is Hebrew.
All right.
It's all right, but I do think that it has everything to do with that. When you make translations, translations are trying really hard to kind of gather the essence of what's said, and it's entirely possible that carefully guard your thoughts was an attempt to gather, to articulate that nuance, which was that in the Hebrew perspective, the heart is as much a source of thoughts as the mind is.
It seems like in that contemporary version, the focus is more on the mind. It's thinking through, and your thoughts and how you tell lies and so forth, reflect or become who you are, whereas the other two seems like it becomes much more internalized, where it is your heart, it is your whole being that is a result of following this.
Right. And I think that's how we in our contemporary language, we often say, like, if you want to say that, follow your intuition, we often say, like, follow your gut or something like that. I think that's kind of close to what we're looking at here, where it's like, that there's this sense that you're following your innards in some way, following your gut kind of thing, and that there's some sense that, like, following your gut is more somehow more a better guide than things like these, than perhaps because this is where your true life is, right? Or your, what is it? Innermost being, or the springs of life, right? These are, this is where the kind of the core of your motivations are.
Another thing that's interesting, especially in the New Revised Standard Version, is the reference to how this affects your body. It's not only your heart, but your speech or your mouth, your eyes, your feet.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So it's very much, the New Revised Standard Version seems to be more embodied in our physically embodied version of this writing than the others are.
One of my Bible study things that I have it says Proverbs doesn't have a storyline. It's simply a collection of practical tips for living.
Mhm.
And then it references it with 1 Kings when God said, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart.
Right. Which was what the gift that was given to Solomon.
Mhm.
Right. Exactly. Right. This is really cool, the way that the Passion Translation, thank you so much, Vicky, for picking this one out, because it's so, the contrast is so great with the
Mhm.
kind of the physically embodied kind of quality that Lori picked out of the New Revised Standard. It seems like the Passion Translation is very theological and kind of almost cerebral approach to it. And yet there's so much there that's really, really interesting.
Mm. This passage, all of them together, the way it's talking about kind of, do this, avoid this,
Mm.
attempt this. For some reason, it makes me think of, and I can't think of the number, the verse and the chapter in Corinthians that you often hear quoted at weddings.
Yeah.
Love is not
Right.
this, love is this.
Yeah.
And there's a whole section, and I forget what that's called. I'm sorry, but I kept thinking of that when I was reading about all these different instructions, so to speak.
Right. The passage you're thinking of, the famous passage you're thinking of, is 1 Corinthians 13. Isn't that right, Mary Lou?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for corroborating. I wasn't sure if it was first or second. I'm pretty sure it's First Corinthians 13, and it's a passage, as you say, Vicky, that is frequently quoted at weddings, and it's actually one that I've used quite a bit at funerals too, because I think it has deep meaning for funerals as well.
Mm.
But yes, exactly right. There is a quality that's very similar in this passage to that. I think we also read a passage I recently preached on a passage from Romans that was very similar to this. That was very kind of like advice in a similar way. But you're right, Tina. It's like a series of just advice, right? It's a collection. The Proverbs is a collection of kind of advice that's being given. I couldn't help thinking when I read the first line of this, of all three, when it says, "My child, listen carefully," or "Listen carefully, my dear child," or "My child, be attentive to my words." These are things that I'm like constantly saying to my kids, right? Like, it's like this, it's this thing that it seems like, it's funny to hear it like coming from this ancient text, because it's like, oh yeah, it's that same struggle that we've always had, which is, would you pay attention, please? Would you please just
Listen to me.
Just listen for once, kind of thing. And but I love the way it goes into the second line, which is like, fill your thoughts with my words, that they penetrate deep into your spirit. Don't forget a single word. The idea here is that we're trying to give advice that goes that seeps deep into your soul, into your innards. And what is the essence of this? It's like a list of advice, but it culminates in this same little piece of advice that goes all the way across, which is, don't swerve, don't make a mistake by turning. Stick to the path. What do you think of that advice? Is it good advice?
Terrific
What-
advice. Yeah.
What struck me was 26.
Uh-huh.
One is says, keep straight the path your feet, and one says, know where you are headed.
Uh-huh.
And one says, watch where you're going.
Right.
I'm like, those three things aren't the same in my mind. They're totally different.
Yeah.
Know where you're headed. You got to have some forethought. You got to think about it. Da 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 da. Watch where you're going is instantaneous. Just
Yeah.
make sure you don't stumble.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other one, make sure that you go straight. Like, okay, I guess they all get you in the right direction and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But it's like they all say something different to me.
Yeah, yeah, the nuance
Yep.
is very
Mm-hmm.
different. You're right. You're right.
Mm,
Isn't that interesting?
In that same area, in another passage, I forget what source it was that I was reading, and I thought, no, I'm not going to put that one in. It talks starting in that section, talking about prostitutes. Don't look at prostitutes. Keep on walking by.
Really?
Don't kiss them. I wish I could remember which one that was from, but the whole last section was about walking right by those prostitutes.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Huh. That's taking some liberties, isn't it?
okay.
Wow. Huh. Fascinating. I wonder if there's something embedded in there that is suggestive of that. Because I wasn't going that way at all in terms of my reading of this passage.
Well, don't allow yourself to be sidetracked
Right.
Yeah.
and detour. But yeah, whoever wrote the other section about the prostitutes, that was just so narrow
Yeah.
an explanation compared to these.
Right. Right. Huh. Very interesting.
Excuse me.
So I guess like oftentimes like you know, what what is it, kind of a euphemism for adultery is turning aside, right? Or you know, going wayward from your straying from your path, kind of thing. Like so maybe there's something to be said for that interpretation. I don't know, but you know, I've always it's really an interesting thing. I there's part of me that really wants to push back a little bit on this straight and narrow path advice, because I do see the value of the straight and narrow idea, but I also see the value in terms of being a creative person. Like I really see the value of going off and bushwhacking in the woods a little bit on occasion.
Yeah.
You know, so to me it really depends on the scenario. Like there are certain ways in which I really want to stay in my lane, right? If you're driving along on the highway, you don't want to be straying out of your lane. Like you want to be in your lane. Like there are situations in which it's important to stay in your lane. But it seems to me as a creative person, like I do tend to want to get out of the beaten path sometimes and wander off a little bit and see what I find.
Now, one of my other study books says the Proverbs speak to issues such as work, money, sex, temptation, drinking, laziness, discipline, and child rearing.
Right.
And I don't quite understand this. Underlying each proverb is the truth that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
Wow. Yeah, that's really like,
That's like,
yeah.
Nah.
That feels yucky to me a little bit.
mhm.
I don't know, how does that feel to you guys?
Nah.
No.
No.
Sounds like what I was taught
Yeah,
years ago.
right, exactly. Like, you know, that's one of the things that I, in my ministry, I'm always try and steer clear of this whole notion of like the fear of God being
Right.
the way to motivate people. I suppose, that's a really strong, it's a really strong, it really exists in the Bible in a really strong way. That's this idea of the fear of God. Sorry, I'm getting texts like crazy from my daughter. I'm trying to ignore them.
We need an update on her too sometime.
But
Well-
I think to your point, Reverend Mark, about being somewhat uncomfortable about being so laser focused and straight on the path and never going one way or the other.
Uh-huh.
I agree, it bothers me as well, because sometimes to me that reflects the people who are just so extreme right that
Yeah.
my way is the only way,
Right.
and I don't want to listen to anybody else's
Right.
opinions or any others' experiences, because this is the way I was taught and this is the way I have to be
Mm.
and have to believe.
Right.
And it doesn't allow for an openness and learning from other people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, my feeling exactly, Lori. And there's such a strong, this really exists. There's a very strong strain of this idea of like the straight and narrow and like being sure to like never to stray here and there. But there's also in the Bible a really strong strain of this idea of humility and being aware that you're not always right and that there might be something that really you need to learn. And how do we learn those things? Because we're open to the possibility of other perspectives. And it seems to me like Jesus was one of the things that Jesus was telling us frequently was to welcome the stranger and to care for those who are hungry and thirsty. And that's when we learn, is when we care for the stranger, right? Because the stranger is going to bring things that we don't know.
Well, and I guess you could say too, I mean, Christ took the path less traveled when he ate with the tax collectors, when he did things on, the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And you can put Liz Cheney in that group right now.
Yes, right.
Where is it?
There's some real courage to that, right? It's really,
Mhm.
it takes a lot of courage to act in a manner that follows your conviction, but does not necessarily follow the majority view, which is exactly what Liz Cheney is doing right now.
One
But
of the things that I heard multiple times, growing up Catholic and going to a Catholic school, was the fear of God.
Yeah.
That's what we were taught.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that we can see each other a little bit better. So I don't know if you guys notice this, but whenever I pray, I always start with gracious and loving God. I never start with almighty, powerful, fearful God. Like, there is that does, I'm not trying to say that doesn't exist, but I really want to focus on grace and love. And I'm not interested as much in power and fear. And because I think that that's really what we need, that's really what we need in our lives. We don't, the expression of power seems like we have enough of that, or that it's not as helpful to us, perhaps. I don't know. That's just my inclination.
I can remember my grandmother telling me, I'll put the fear of God into you.
Yeah. And that's not a welcome thing to hear, right?
No, that's scary when you're a kid.
Right. That's really frightening.
Mhm.
my mother told me that her father was a Dutch Reformed church minister, and he was a rather austere fellow. And she said that to him the most important thing about Christianity was obedience. Obedience, you know. And to me, that's like the least important thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to emphasize obedience at all, really. I want to
Mhm.
emphasize mystery. You know, that's what's most.
I suppose for me, digging in deeper and looking at some of those words, is that the message is don't lie, don't be deceitful.
Yeah,
Those are hurtful things to others.
right.
And if you take from this saying that what they want you to do is to not be judgmental, to
Mm,
not lie, to try to, you know, to keep yourself on a narrow path of trying not to sway to hurt others. If you look at it, if you take some of those words,
mm.
that's a little more positive.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, right. We depend on you, Lori, to keep our uh, view on the passage itself rather than going off board here. Thank you. Because that's true, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is important not to be deceitful.
Yes.
One of the things I think of that's kind of fresh in my mind is this. I'm doing boundary training. I just did boundary training with the United Church of Christ, and as a minister, I have to do boundary training every 3 years. And I've done it before, but it's really good to do it again every 3 years. Why? Because it's like it's this reminder that there are certain things, certain ways, and ways you just want to stay in your lane. You don't want to
Right.
get into the practice of being deceitful or um, or hurting somebody by having an irresponsible relationship with them, right? Like that. Those are the kind of things that will really do huge amount of damage to people, not only to their, especially because ministers, like this passage says, we relate to people not only in the mind but in the heart and the spirit, right? So it's like we have huge responsibilities not to damage people in those ways. So I'm reminded of that by what you say, Lori, is that there are certain things that you really, really do want to be very careful to stay in your lane about.
When I think about how most of it says the straight and narrow, go this way, and that kind of thing. I think it's confusing in a way. I mean, I understand the straight and narrow, staying in your lanes on certain things like just what you have just said,
Mm-hmm.
but life is not straight. It is a winding path.
Yeah.
Therefore, you got to have that give and take. You got to go with the flow in the right things. And going forward I mean, it says don't go right or left. I'm like, I'm sorry, life goes right and left. It goes everywhere. And that's where it's a little confusing in that part of it. But as you just came out of the boundaries, that's totally clear. I
Yeah.
mean, there are some things you just got to stay in that lane. That's
Right.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But
Right.
as for life in general, for everything, if you took this verse, no,
Yeah.
I don't. It's just only, you've just got to learn to take what you need to
Mm.
do the right thing.
That's so insightful too, Brenda.
Mm.
Very, very insightful. That's because I think you're absolutely right. Life it takes you all over the place, right?
Yeah, we are not straight.
What was I thinking about?
While you're thinking, but we don't take everything in the Bible literally. If we do,
Oh, I agree.
cutting off hands, we wouldn't be wearing leather shoes.
Right.
There's a lot that we wouldn't be doing.
Right. There's that famous prayer, right? The what is it? The prayer that's called the Serenity Prayer. You're familiar with that prayer where it's like, God give me the, what is it? The grace to know what can can you help me, Mary Lou?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually was written, a German theologian wrote it.
Yeah, Niebuhr.
And if you read anything else of his, you can't understand it.
Right.
And that is so straightforward.
Yeah.
It's just such an odd twist from him.
Yeah.
It's give me the strength to
God grant me the
accept
serenity
things.
to
Oh, go
accept
ahead,
it.
Tina.
Go ahead, Mary Lou.
Okay. Give me the strength to accept the things that I cannot change and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah. Right.
And courage to change the things I can,
Yes. Yeah.
and wisdom to know the difference.
Right. So
Yeah.
right. So that's what's reminding me about what you just said, Brenda, right? Which is that there are some places where you
Right.
have to stick on the straight and narrow. Some places where you have to accept the fact that you're going to be going left and right because that's where life is taking you. And you have to hope for the blessing of the wisdom to know the difference, right?
Yeah.
Between the two. And that's, in some ways, that's the beauty of having religion as an experience of community, like we're doing, right?
Right.
Because we get to have each other's wisdom about this kind of thing. We're not alone with it. We can help each other to discern that difference between when we're going straight and when we have to go left and right. And there's ways in which our church goes left and right in a way that Jaffrey itself goes straight, right? Like,
Right.
we have that rainbow flag, which is going left and right, which in a way that Jaffrey will go straight. And we have the discernment and the courage to do that, which I think is powerful. Right.
Mhm.
These passages are so cool. I love doing this with you guys. It's just so great. So,
And it's Proverbs.
yeah. So interesting. I love the way you guys open it up in such like, it's so much more rich now than it was before when I first looked at it.
I agree. What I get, like you just mentioned about the different opinions, the different input from everyone, all the different intelligent comments that I would never, just sitting here reading this, think of on my own. And then I have all these other people inputting. I just depend on that so much, and I've learned so much from you. But then somebody, Lori or Tina or somebody, will say something like that, and I'll say, that's right, a light bulb goes off. I never thought of that on my own.
Yeah, so great.
Terrific learning experience. When I first read these verses, I thought at first, I don't so much anymore, that they were so simplistic, like, you do this and your life will be great.
Right.
And there's so often in your life that it can't be like this.
Right.
Or you're because we're not perfect, and we've had something bad happen to us, something that's depressing us, or whatever the case may be. And to do this, and it just throws us out of whack. We're not on the straight and narrow anymore. So we can't always do this and look at things simplistically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's very true. Yeah.
One of the of Bob's vision scriptures that really, maybe we could look into it for next week, that really made an impact on me was in March of 2018, because that was when I was beginning, after my shoulder surgery, to get off the opioids. And the scripture is Jonah 2, verses 3 and verse 7.
All right. That's my cue to say, go ahead, Tina, read it.
Says, you hurled me from inside the fish. Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, you hurled me into the deep, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. And Bob's take on it, when we look up from the depths, the lowest point in our lives, we see God, his holiness, goodness, and grace. If we turn away from our sin and confess it to God, he will forgive us. God answers prayers from the valley.
Nice. The so I'm open to anything. There's lots there's lots of possibilities here. I think that the vision scriptures that Bob provides for us is definitely a good resource for sure. Let me see. So hey, guess what, you guys? I have something kind of exciting to tell you. I don't know if this is going to pan out or not, but the curator of the Museum of Fine Arts is I'm going to be talking to in a few minutes, and
Wow.
they are interested in the quilts. So I
That's
really
awesome.
I'm real like I have no idea. Like I probably shouldn't have told you about it because I might jinx it, but like it is really, this is like
Now, which is that?
That's
in New York
huge.
or Boston?
Yeah.
Boston.
Boston.
Boston. Oh, that is, oh,
That's
That's
awesome.
giant. That's huge.
make it happen, Mark.
So
Mark, don't we kind of have an unspoken rule that in gatherings like this, what happens here stays among us?
yeah,
Except that now it's on video.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
It hasn't been sent out yet.
Right.
But no, but here, yeah. So I really shouldn't have told you. But like,
Oh, it's so exciting to
but
hold
it's
it.
pretty
you can
exciting.
edit it.
It is exciting.
It's pretty exciting, and I'm talking to them at 12:05. So I have to
Gotta
get
go.
going.
You
But,
gotta go? We
yeah.
gotta go.
We gotta go.
But it's,
Prayers.
who knows?
Yes.
You know, the pretty interesting situation here.
Oh, I'm glad you told us.
Great. Oh,
That's great that they're even just thinking about it. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, thank
All
you.
right.
Thank
Here.
Well,
you.
you guys, wonderful Bible study again. As always, I'm so blessed. We're all so blessed to have each other.
Mhm.
Yes.
This is really powerful stuff. And
Thank you.
you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Okay.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good.
Safe
good
trip.
travels. Bye now.
Thank you.